"You're not walking her down that aisle," Mrs. Whittemore said in flat, like she was reading off a seating chart instead of ending a man's whole reason for getting up in the morning. Nolan stood there in his one good suit, still smelling faintly of cedar mulch from a job he'd cut short to get here on time. Somewhere behind that closed door, his daughter was getting ready to marry a stranger's son, and he wasn't going to be in the room for it. 10 years from now, Julia would tell this story at her own kitchen table to her own daughter, and she'd get quiet right about here. She'd say, "Your grandpa didn't argue. That's the part people never believe." She'd say it happened on an ordinary Saturday morning in a rented barn outside Ogallala, Nebraska, with frost still crusting the grass in the shade. She'd say the whole thing turned on a song nobody was supposed to hear. But that morning, none of them knew how it would end. Nolan had raised Julia alone since she was 6, back when her mother left and never sent so much as a birthday card. He landscaped for a living, trimmed hedges, laid sod, built retaining walls for people who barely looked at him twice. His hands knew the weight of a root ball better than they knew comfort. Every August, he replanted the flower bed under Julia's window himself, packing the soil down with his palms, because it was the one thing he could give her that grew back every year. She used to sit on the porch steps and watch him work. "Dad, why do you always edge the bed so straight?" "Because crooked lines drive me crazy. Same reason I raised you the way I did. No shortcuts." That line came back to him now, standing outside the bridal suite door, arms crossed against the cold. Inside, Julia sat in front of a mirror with her hair half pinned, staring at a text message from Weston that she'd read 4 times already. "Mom's really upset. Can he sit in the back, please, for today?" She hadn't answered yet. Her maid of honor, Priya, was pretending to fix a bobby pin so she'd have an excuse to hover. "You don't have to do what she wants. It's not that simple." "It kind of is, though." Julia's throat tightened. "If I push back today, Weston's whole family makes it a thing forever. Every holiday, everything. I just want one day where nobody's keeping score." "So instead, your dad keeps the score, outside in the cold." Julia didn't answer that one. The trouble had started 3 weeks earlier at a dinner meant to finalize seating charts. Mrs. Whittemore had brought her own version of the guest list, one where the head table photo included only presentable family, her phrase, delivered with a smile stiff enough to crack. She'd looked Nolan up and down, the sun-worn hands, the boots he'd polished but couldn't fully de-scuff, and made her opinion clear without saying it outright. "We just think," she'd said, folding her napkin into a smaller and smaller square, the trouble had started 3 weeks earlier at a dinner meant to finalize seating charts. Mrs. Whittemore had brought her own version of the guest list, one where the head table photo included only presentable family, her phrase, delivered with a smile stiff enough to crack. She'd looked Nolan up and down, the sun-worn hands, the boots he'd polished but couldn't fully de-scuff, and made her opinion clear without saying it outright. "We just think," she'd said, folding her napkin into a smaller and smaller square, "that walking down the aisle photos set a tone for the whole album, and Weston's father passed, so it would mean so much if my brother stood in that spot. Symmetry, you understand." Julia had opened her mouth to object. Nolan had touched her arm under the table before she could. "It's her day," he'd told her, later, in the truck, staring straight ahead of the dark road. He meant it. That was the part that broke something loose in Julia's chest. He meant it so easily, like giving himself up was just another Tuesday task, like trimming a hedge nobody thanked him for. The morning of the wedding, frost silvered the field behind the barn, Nolan arrived 2 hours early, anyway, because old habits don't disappear just because you've been uninvited. He walked the grounds out of nervous energy, noticing, because he couldn't help it, the drainage swale someone had graded wrong, water pooling where it shouldn't. He almost fixed it with his bare hands before catching himself. Not his job today. Not his day at all, apparently. A groomsman spotted him lingering by the parking lot and mentioned it to Weston, who mentioned it to his mother, who marched out in her robe and curlers like she'd caught a trespasser on her land. "You can't be out here," Mrs. Whitmore said. "It's not appropriate." "I raised that girl by myself, bottle-fed her, sat up with her through chickenpox and every broken heart after that. I think I've earned 5 minutes." Mrs. Whitmore's mouth thinned into something almost like pity. "Today isn't about what you've earned." She turned and walked back inside, and Nolan stood there a long moment, breath fogging in the cold, before he did the only thing that felt true to who he was. He waited outside anyway. Inside, an old speaker in the corner of the Getting Ready suite crackled to life, someone's phone hooked up to a Bluetooth dock, playing a pre-ceremony playlist Priya had built. 3 songs in, a familiar opening chord slipped out before Priya could skip it, embarrassed. "Sorry, that one's not supposed to—" "Leave it," Julia said. It was the song, the one Nolan used to hum while he mulched the beds under her window, the one they'd half-joked for years would be their father-daughter dance someday, back before Weston's family started drawing lines around who got to matter. Julia had quietly pulled it from the reception playlist 2 weeks ago, so it wouldn't hurt worse than it needed to. Hearing it now felt like someone reaching into her chest. "Turn it off," she said, and then immediately, "No, wait, leave it. Just leave it a second." Priya watched her go somewhere far away and come back different. The ceremony began on time because Mrs. Whitmore made sure of that. Rows of white folding chairs, a string quartet doing its best against the wind, Weston standing at the front in a suit too tailored to be comfortable. Weston's uncle offered his arm at the aisle's edge, playing understudy for a father he wasn't. Julia stood at the back doors, veil down, bouquet trembling slightly in her grip. Through the gap in the barn's sliding door, she could see her father standing off to the side of the gravel lot, hands in his pockets, watching from a distance like a man used to being kept at arm's length from his own life. The processional music started. She took 1 step forward, then stopped. "Julia?" Priya whispered. "You okay?" "No," Julia said. "No, I'm not." She turned, walked straight past the startled coordinator, out the side door, into the cold, toward the man in the parking lot who hadn't moved because he genuinely hadn't expected anything different. "Julia, what are you—" Nolan started. "I'm not doing this without you," her voice cracked on you. "I don't care about the photos or the symmetry or any of it. You planted flowers under my window every single August since I was 6 years old. You think I'm walking down an aisle on a stranger's arm because his mother doesn't like your boots? Sweetheart, it's not worth a scene on your wedding day. It's already a scene. I'm just choosing which one." Mrs. Whitmore appeared in the doorway behind them, face gone pale with fury. "This is completely inappropriate. Everyone is waiting." "Then they can keep waiting, because my father is walking me down that aisle, or there isn't going to be a wedding today. That's not a threat. That's just true." For a moment, nobody moved. Wind cut across the gravel lot, rattling a nearby drainage grate Nolan still hadn't fixed. Weston came jogging out from the front, tie loosened, confusion and something like relief crossing his face all at once. "Mom," Weston said quietly, "let it go. Please, just let it go." Mrs. Whitmore looked at her son, then at Julia's face, set and unmoving, and something in her seemed to understand she'd already lost this particular argument, whatever ground she'd gained from fighting it further. "Fine," she said, thin-lipped. "Fine. They restarted the processional 12 minutes late, which nobody in that barn would ever remember as a flaw. Julia walked in on her father's arm, veil catching the light through the high windows, and when they reached the front, the coordinator, at Priya's whispered instruction, cued a different track for just a few seconds before the ceremony music resumed. The father-daughter song, unmistakable, unmistakably theirs. Nolan's breath caught. He hadn't expected that, hadn't expected any of it, honestly. Not the walk, not this small, stolen echo of a dance they'd never gotten to have. "I love you," Julia whispered, not caring who heard. "Every flower bed, every single one." "I love you too, kiddo. Now go marry him properly. I did my part." He placed her hand in Weston's, stepped back to his seat, a seat right up front this time, no argument from anyone, and sat down like a man finally allowed to stop bracing for the next blow. Julia tells her daughter this story every year now, usually around the anniversary, usually with that same pause right before the ending. She says her father never once raised his voice that whole morning, not at Mrs. Whittemore, not at anyone. She says he just kept showing up, the way he always had, until showing up was finally enough. Thank you for listening to this one all the way through.